let's look at the search technique. How do you go about searching for a value? So before I look at Java code, let me just explain how the search works. Let's assume I've got students in my class. So each of these circles represent students in my class. And these students are all writing a test. All the students are writing a test. And I've come into class, or somebody has come into the class. Okay, this is a group of students that I don't know. And I want to locate somebody by the name of, let's say, Zama. I want to find Zama in this class of students. I don't know the students, so I don't know who Zama is. I can't interrupt the test, so I can't say, please stop, I'm looking for Zama. So the only way I can do this is I'm going to go to each person. I'm going to go to each person and ask them, are you Zama? I'm just going to be soft and tell them, are you Zama? And the person will tell me yes or no. So I'll go to the first one and ask them, are you Zama? They probably will say no. Are you Zama? No. So I'm going to each person and I'm checking to see who Zama is. I'm finished with that row and I didn't find the person. In fact, maybe I should put down a cross because I didn't find the person. Okay, then all I'm going to do is start with the next. And I check and I keep checking, looking, asking the person, are you Zama? And in the second row, I haven't found the person. So I then move on to the next row and I check. And then at some point, guess what? Guess what? I found the person I'm looking for. Right? So I found the person I'm looking for. So this effectively is a search that we were doing. We started at the beginning. We started at the beginning at some point in the beginning, and I went sequentially. Another name for sequential is linear, one after the other, right? This is a sequential. It's a sequential search or a linear. Linear means one after the other. I keep checking and I ask for the name that I'm looking for until I find the person I'm looking for. And once I find the person I'm looking for, I stop. There's no need. I know some of you are thinking, but what if there are two Zamas? And how do you know if I got the right person? Let's assume that there was only one, right? So this is a linear search, right? And I was able to find the person I'm looking for. So that the first part of this is the person was found. Okay, now let's look at the second part. The second part, when you are searching for something, it is possible, guys, it is possible. I'm doing a search. Let's put another group of students here. Right, I'm just going to create a smaller group of students. As I'm searching, it's possible I'm searching and I'm not finding the person. I'm not finding the person. And I reach the end and the person is not found. Person is not found. So there are two possibilities when you are doing a search. The first possibility in the search is I find whoever I'm looking for. Or the second possibility is the person I'm looking for or whatever I'm looking for is not found. So these are the two different outputs that I can get when I'm doing a search. Right? So let's try and code this now. Let's try and code this to see how it would work in Java. So I'm going to write my Java code. So remember, the first thing we did was I knew the name I was searching for. So let's first input a name that we are looking. Or let me declare an array. Firstly, let's declare an array int bracket that denotes it's an array. So I'm going to say marks. Let's call it marks. I'm storing marks in this array. So this is a little different from the example that had strings, names. Here I've got numbers, equals new int, and let's assume I've got 10 marks. Okay, so the assumption is that I've already written the input routine. I'm not going into that. We did that previously. Input is already written. Whoops, what's going on here? Input is already written. So now I'm doing the search. So the values for the marks are in the array, and I'm going to search for a mark in the array. So it's similar. I'm doing a similar concept. I'm not searching for a name. So I've got this array that has marks. I'm going to input a mark, and I'm going to determine at what position is that mark going to be found. So it's the same idea that I'm going to use in terms of the sequential search. And that mark could either be found or the mark is not found. So I'm applying the same concept, right? So let's first get the mark, right? So this is a routine I'm writing in my public static void main. So I'm going to say mk. I've got a variable. I'm going to int. It's just an integer variable equals kb dot next int, right? And yes, obviously I would have said system. You usually must have a system dot out dot println where you'd have asked the user to enter the mark. Right, so enter the mark, and I've got the mark stored. That's what I'm searching for. This is my search value that I'm going to be looking at. Now let's search the array. I now want to search the array. So let's start the loop, because the loop allows me, as we discussed the last time, the loop allows me to go to each cell in the array. So for I, for int I equals 0, less than length mark. Again, it would have been if I called it ARR marks. I'm being a little sloppy, but you all can do that. So marks.length I plus plus. So I've set up my for loop that's going to allow me to generate values starting from 0 up to the length of this array. And now I want to check. I want to check if marks, that's my array I, so treat it like an array, if that's equal to mk. This mk is what I'm searching for, right, guys? This is my search value. That is my search value. And I'm running a loop, and this is my array. Marks is my array. So I'm checking to see if marks I is equal to mk. That's the value I'm wanting to find. And if it's equal, I'm now wanting to print the position where it was found. So system dot out dot println. Okay, found. Right, I got a match. I got a match. So found at position. And now I'm going to say plus. So what tells me the position? How do I know the position? The position is this I variable. This is critical for you to understand. When I refer to the I in my array, so here's the array, right? This is my array. I represents this position here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I represents. So when I print I, it's telling me that position. So I am going to now say found at position, and I'm going to print I. And let's close that. Here's my match. And then let's close this. There's my match in my brackets. Okay, so I've written code now, right? This is my code to input a number. There we are. We are inputting the number here, right? I'm inputting this. This is where I'm inputting my number that I'm searching for. And then I'm running a loop. I'm running a for loop. And this for loop, I'm checking each cell, marks I. I check each cell as I is changing. When I is 0, I'm looking at the first cell. When I is 1, I'm looking at the next cell. And each time I'm looking to see if it's a match. And when I find a match, I display a message and I display the value of I, where it was found. So I've successfully now done the first part when it is found. What I'm looking for is found. What this code does not incorporate is when it's not found, when the value is not found. So if I to ask you now, how will I check or how will I know if the value is not found? Right? Here's my if check that tells me when the value is found. So how will I know when the value is not found? I think 80% of the students are thinking. I think I can read most of your minds in terms of what you are thinking. Most of you are thinking all we need is an else. And in the else we need to say, I think all of you will understand if I say SOP, right? So now to print line, and you will say the mark was not found. It was not found. And the reason, okay, so obviously this bracket is going to come here and that's going to come down there. So if the mark is found, there we are. That's when the mark is found. And if it's not found, in the else, it's going to say mark was not found. So that's what I think most of you are thinking. Because in general, whenever I ask students this question, that's the answer I get. That's the answer I get. But guys, this is not correct. This is not correct. So please let's pay sharp attention to understand why this is wrong. Remember that when you have an if and an else, when the condition is true, it goes into the if. When the condition is false, it goes into the else. So it must go somewhere. It either goes into the if or it goes into the else. It must go into one of the two. Now, if I'm searching for something, let's put in some random values here, 10, 8, 6, 2, and 5. So I'm just putting some values in there. And let's assume that the number I'm searching for is 2. That's the number I'm looking for. But I'm doing a linear search. So in my linear search, I'm starting at the beginning. So we're going to check, is marks I is 0, is marks I equal to MK, and MK is 2. That's what I'm searching for. MK is 2. So when I check the first value, do I have a match? 10 equal to 2. Now the problem is when there is no match, it's going to come to the else and it's going to say the mark was not found. The loop is going to go back up. I is now going to be 1 and it's checking 8. Is 8 equal to 2? Is that a match? No, the if statement is going to be false and it's going to go to the else and it's going to say not found. So it said not found when I was 0. Now it's going to say not found when I is 1. You go back up, I becomes 2. It's not a match because that's not a match. So it's going to go and say mark not found. You go back up, I becomes 3. And at that stage, it finds what you're looking for. And then it's going to, this condition is going to be true and it's going to say found at position 3 because I is position 3. But what did it do prior to it coming and saying found at position 3? It said mark not found, mark was not found, mark was not found. And that's not right. And the reason it's not right is by putting the else in here, making a decision while we are still searching. So while you are still searching, don't make a decision to tell whether the mark was found or not. It's still too early to make that decision if the mark was found or not. So we cannot have an else. It's wrong to have the else inside of the for loop. Inside of the for loop, it's wrong to have the else. So what am I saying? Do I take that else and move it outside the for loop and keep the if on the inside? That makes no sense from a programming syntax point of view. That makes absolutely no sense. I can't take the else onto the outside. So I have to find another way in which I'm going to solve this problem. But I can't do it with the if and the else while I'm searching, because when it doesn't find a match, it's simply going to keep saying it was not found. So let's look at how we should go about solving this question. So let's get the mark that I'm searching for. Int mark equals kb dot next int. I'm leaving out the SOP. I'm leaving out the SOP above that. You should understand what that means. Let's start my loop for int I equals 0, I less than my array. I'm still keeping my array called mark. What is it, mark or marks with an S? Let me quickly check. It was marks with an S. So I less than marks dot length I plus plus, right? And I am going to then check if, exactly as I did previously, if marks I equals mk, I found a match. If I found a match, system out println found at position, found at position, and I print the value of I. And I then close, and I close that. Remember, we said we don't want an else. So this code works perfectly provided I find the mark. This code is going to work perfectly provided I find the mark. Now, when I check the first mark and it's not the mark I'm looking for, it's just not going to come into the if. There's no else. This is a one-way if. It's a one-way if, which means there's no else. So it's just going to go back up. I is going to become 2. Sorry, it was 0. It'll become 1. And it's just going to check the next cell. So when it's not a match, there's no else to do anything. It just goes back up and checks the next one until it finds a match, until you got a match. And when you got a match, it will come inside and it'll print. So the first part solves the problem very nicely. But now what if that mark was not found? If the mark was not found. So we use a very nice technique here. Okay, so I'm going to create a Boolean variable, right? And a Boolean variable can take on two values, either true or false. So I'm going to create a Boolean variable. I think you say Boolean, or it could be bool. I'm not sure. Again, remember I told you I'm working with multiple programming languages. When I type this in my editor, I'll determine whether this is correct or not. So I'm going to create this variable called flag, and I'm going to set it to false. So I'm creating this Boolean variable, and I'm setting it to false. And then that Boolean variable, I change its value inside when I find the value. So here inside, I'm going to say flag equals true. So flag is equal to true when I find the mark I'm looking for. And then when the loop is finished, notice I'm outside of the loop. When the loop is finished, if flag stayed false, if flag stayed false, what does that mean? If flag was still false. Because remember, I started it at false and I change it when I find what I'm looking for. So if it stayed false, it can only mean one thing. It was not found. The mark was not found. So this is how you would go about doing a typical search, where you create a Boolean variable, you set it to false. You change its value only when you find what you are looking for. Once you found it, then the value would have changed. Out of the loop, value, if it had changed, it's not going to come in here, obviously. But if it remained false, it means it never found a match. So this is a nice technique that goes about finding or searching for a value. I'm searching for integers. You could very well have been searching for strings or doubles or characters for that matter. But this is the technique. Please remember, you don't have an if with an else inside of that for loop when you're using the search. This is the code that is required to conduct a search. We have an array, and this array contains 5 cells. We then input 5 marks into this array, and we then perform the search. This is the code that's required for the search. Keep in mind that when you're doing a search, you first need to get a number from the user before the search can be executed. And this is where we are getting the number from the user to search for. Let's look at each of these segments in more detail. Here, you will now see that we are inputting our 5 numbers. The array, the loop is executing from 0 to the length, the array.length. It's less than the array.length. We request the user to enter a mark, and we then input the mark from the keyboard. Take note, I've got the scanner class set up that allows me to do the input, and I can use the nextInt method. And the scanner class is being imported from the java.util package. When we look at the search, you will notice that we first get the number we're searching for. We then run the loop, looking for the number. This is the if statement that looks for the equality of the number. And when it is found, it is then displayed. We also have the Boolean variable flag set to false. And when I find it, I change it to true. Outside of the loop, I check to see if flag remained false. If flag remained false, then it means the mark was not found. Let's give this code a quick run to determine how it works. So if I open up the output window, it's asking me to enter the mark. I'm going to enter 5 marks, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So that was the input method. Now for the search, it wants me to enter a mark. I'm going to enter 40 and, well, actually I entered 400. So it then tells me that the mark was not found. So at least we know that when we're searching for a mark that's not in the array, the program works and it tells you the mark was not found. Let's look at a case when the mark is found. We run, and again, I'm going to enter 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And I'm going to search, let's search for the number 20 this time round. And it tells me the mark was found at position 1. Now, remember, the reason we're getting position 1, it's because in the array, the first position is 0 and the second position is 1. Because this could be misleading to the user, you could possibly want to change your output when you find it, not to output position I, but to output position I plus 1. In this way, it would have output 2. So from a user's perspective, the user can relate to the mark 20 found at position 2. From a programmer's perspective, we start at position 0. But for somebody using the program, you don't usually start counting from 0. This is 20, which is my second mark. So the user expects you to have an answer found at position 2. So that is why I think possibly it would be better when you displaying the position to display I plus 1. I hope this code helps you in understanding the search better.